Welcome back. So next we have a pretty fun model, which is called Whisper. It's also relatively new. It's only been around for a couple of weeks at this point, at least open to the world. It's still in beta. And the whole point of Whisper is that it is a speech recognition model. It works with audio files. And it can do things like speech recognition, transcription, translation, and language identification. So we provide it an audio file, and usually it's an audio file of someone speaking, and we'll take that audio file, and at its most basic form, it returns a transcription of the speech in that file. So you could use it to do things like take meeting notes, for example. It's not great at recognizing multiple speakers at the moment, or at least telling you who is speaking. It just sort of gives you one transcript at the end, but it still is pretty cool and powerful. It's still in beta, like I said, and it costs 0.6 cents or $0.006 per minute of audio, and that's rounded to the nearest second. And I'm sure that will change as well, which makes me hesitate to even quote any prices in this course, but I felt like, I should at least give you an idea of the ballpark as I'm recording this, even if they'll change in the future. So there's an important note about Whisper, which is there is an API. I'm going to start by showing you the API using the OpenAI client. It's very, very easy. We send an audio file, we get a transcription. But we can also run the Whisper model locally. So it's open source, you can download it. It can be a pain to install, but this means that you could then use Whisper without having to pay anything. So I'll show both, but I'm going to start with the easy version, which is using the OpenAI API, right? We send a request, we include the file, and it will respond back with a transcription. I'm going to show you that in the next video. That's just a quick orientation to what Whisper is. Okay, so as I said in the previous video, Whisper is a speech recognition model, and we have two ways of working with it. The harder way is to install it locally on our machine, actually get the model running on our machine, and there's a Python wrapper for that where everything happens on our computer without OpenAI, API, tokens, none of that really involved, where we're not being charged. We will get to that. But in this video, I'm going to show you how to make a request, send a file, and get a transcription. It's the easiest, most painless way, but it does cost some money. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is get some audio. And if you're following along, you have a couple of choices. You can record yourself just using your iPhone, like any audio recorder, and get some sort of WAV file or MP3 file of just a voice talking. You could go find one online, get a famous speech. There are many free online resources. Or what I'm going to do is actually write a function. Well, I found this function. I'm not writing it myself. Let me show it to you. Okay, here it is. This function I'm calling record audio, expects a number of seconds. And then what it will do is record an audio file that number of seconds long and save it, in this case, as output.wav, whatever I name this, and whatever path I provide. So it's just an easy way to record audio dynamically. This way I can show you some of the things that Whisper is good at and not good at, instead of having a bunch of pre-recorded audio. The problem with this function is it requires Pi Audio. Now, Pi Audio is notoriously annoying to install if you don't have it installed. There's a lot of dependencies and things that could go wrong. So if you want to try and follow along, you can download this notebook, copy this function, try running it. You're going to have to import or install Pi Audio, pip install Pi Audio. But things go wrong all the time. You might need to install certain, if you don't have the command line developer tools on a Mac, you'll have to install that, which can take sometimes over an hour. You'll probably need to install Homebrew if you don't have that. There's just all sorts of errors that you might come across. So I'll have a text lecture after this video with some pointers if you do run into trouble. But remember, it is not a dependency of Whisper. This is just to get a function that will record audio and spit out a file. The only thing Whisper cares about is that we have an audio file. So if you want to just record something on your phone, record something in like GarageBand or whatever audio recording app you have, feel free to do that instead. Okay, so I'm going to run this function, and I'll just prove to you that it works, hopefully. Down here, I will do a record audio for 5 seconds. Okay, so 5 is just supposed to be a number. And it says it's recording. Hello, testing, 1, 2, 3. I hope this works. Let's see if it works. Okay. All right, so it says it saved a file at output.wav. I didn't have it put it in a folder probably should do that, but it's in here somewhere. Where are you? There it is. Here's the audio file. Now, I don't think my computer is going to be happy about playing it out loud while I'm also recording this. I've had it happen in the past where it just quits my recording software unexpectedly. So there is an audio file here, and the way that we'll test if it works is by just providing it to Whisper. So I have a file that just says like testing 1, 2, 3, nothing exciting. But if you have any audio file, just make sure that you're able to access that file, put it somewhere where you can then, know the path and know the name, and send it to Whisper, which is what I'm about to show you. So the first step to send something to Whisper is to have a file. So I'm going to open the file, which is just called output.wav, and I'm going to read it just like that, and I'll call this, audio file. Make sure that it finds that file. Okay, no problem. Now, when it comes time to actually send this to OpenAI via the endpoint, it's openai.audio.transcribe. There's also translate, which I'll show in a separate video. And then we'll specify the model. I'll do this on a couple of lines here. And the model is going to be Whisper 1. Here's the documentation on OpenAI's website. You can see model. It says only Whisper-1 is currently available. Okay? And the two things that are required are model and file. And I'm using a WAV, W-A-V format. You can also do MP3, MP4, MPEG. As you can see here, there's other options. Okay. So we'll head back here. Model is Whisper-1. And then I have to provide my audio file. And it's called audio file from this variable. And then let's take a look. Well, let's save that to a variable called response. We'll run this. It sends my audio file off to the API. We get a response, and we look at it. And there we are. And it says it's recording. Hello, testing 1, 2, 3. I hope this works. Let's see if it works. So let's try a more complex example. I'll do 10 seconds, and I'll just pretend I'm having a conversation with you. Hello, everyone. My name is Colt. I am so happy to be talking to you today. I really am just overjoyed. I have chickens, lots of eggs every day, and that's it. I'm out of time. What a sentence, or what a speech. So I'll just load that file again into my variable. I'll send it over to OpenAI using the audio.transcribe function, and look at our response. Hello, everyone. My name is Colt. I am so happy to be talking to you today. I really am just overjoyed. I have chickens, lots of eggs every day, and that's it. Okay, so that is the simple version of interacting with Whisper. We don't have to download the model. We don't have to run anything on our machine. The most annoying part of this video is just this function that records audio, which has nothing to do with Whisper. Again, you just send any audio file you want using this openai.audio.transcribe, and it returns, I guess specifically we should look at the text property here, a transcription in text based on our audio file. So there's a bit more to talk about. I'll also talk about translation, and then we'll see how to run Whisper locally on our machine. But that's the basics. Welcome back. The next thing I want to talk about is a special parameter we can provide with the Whisper endpoint, which is called prompt. And you might be thinking, well, what is the point of a prompt if we're providing an audio file to be transcribed? Basically, by providing a prompt, we can add additional context. So let me show you an example where additional context might be nice. I'm going to talk about the DALL-E model, OpenAI's image generation model. I'm going to record 10 seconds. Hello, everyone. I'm here to tell you about DALL-E. DALL-E is an image generating model. DALL-E takes text and spits out an image. DALL-E, DALL-E, DALL-E. Okay. Then I'm going to upload or access the file, put it in this variable, send it off to be transcribed. And then let's look at the response. What does my response say? DALL-E, misspelled, like the artist's name. Earlier, when I did this, I was actually getting the name Dolly, like the D-O-L-L-Y, like the famous sheep that was cloned. Either way, it's not the Dolly spelling that I'm referring to. So what I can do is provide some context and steer the model using prompt. So it's optional text to guide the model style or continue a previous audio segment. And it should match the audio language, meaning, if you're working with English audio, you should provide an English prompt. So I only really speak English, so we're working with English. So let me show you if I tweak this and I provide a prompt and I say something like, you know what, maybe I'll do this down here so we can compare the two. We'll call this response with prompt. And all that I'll change is I'll add a prompt that says, man talking about OpenAI and Dolly, spelled correctly. Okay, and I send it off, and then let's look at our response with prompt variable, and specifically the text property. And there we are. Hello everyone, I'm here to tell you about Dolly, and it's now spelled correctly. So it's not just, I'm not trying to give it the correct word to use, I'm just giving it context. It probably could have figured it out if I had only said something about OpenAI. I'm not positive, but in my experience, it can, you don't have to give it this exact spelling of every word that you're using. That kind of defeats the point, but you can give it context or point it in a direction. So that's what we do with prompt. It's not required, but if you find that the API needs steering or there's specific jargon or terms, you can then provide a prompt to give it some additional context that pertains to the audio file that you're trying to transcribe. And that's it. All right. So the next thing I'll show you is how to have Whisper translate an audio file to English. And currently that's the only option. If we look at the API documentation for Create Translation, actually, if we go to the documentation, not the reference, and then we go to text, speech to text, here it is. It mentions that it only transcribes to English text at the moment. So we give it a German file, a Mandarin file, a Japanese audio file, and then if we call .translate on the OpenAI client, or if you just sent a request to the endpoint for translation under API reference, audio, /audio/transcriptions, if you sent your own custom, post request from scratch, either way, it's only going to return an English transcription. So it will translate based on that audio file, but we can't control what language it will go to. It's only English. Okay, so I have a new notebook, Whisper Translation, the same function in here. I don't even think I'm going to use that function. I'll just try translating some of the audio files I've already written. So let's take the Italian news file, which is ./audio/ItalianNews.wave, open it with read mode, and then let's pass that through to OpenAI.audio, and instead of transcription or transcribe, I'm going to do translate. And then I still have to pass the model, which is only at the moment Whisper 1. There's no option other than that. And then the file will be Italian news, the file that I just opened here. Save this to a response variable. Let's call this Italian response. And let's see what happens. Okay. And here we are. While the alarm for the virus in China is growing, in Italy only last week, almost 500,000 cases of seasonal flu are reported, reaching its peak in January, as was expected by the Ministry of Health. So far, Italians have been affected by almost 3 million cases. So, seems like a decent translation to me. Again, I don't speak Italian, but it was just a clip of Italian news that I recorded. And that's pretty much it. I could show another example if I go and get some other language, right? I don't specify that it's Italian. I don't tell it I want it to be English. It just determines what language it is automatically, and then we'll transcribe it as the English translation and respond back with that. If I don't want a translation, then that's where I call .transcribe, which just gives me a transcription in the original language. Okay, curiosity got the best of me. I'm going to try this in Chinese too. So I found some Chinese news. I'm going to record it.
昨天，中央气象台继续发布寒潮蓝色预警，多地气温创今年入冬以来的新低。那本轮寒潮天气持续时间长，影响范围广。不过，寒冷的天气依然挡不住人们的热情，冬季美景吸引了许多的游客。
这一则新闻讲的是寒冷天气带来了很大的影响。
Okay, so I have no idea what that was about, but let's try opening that file. So open. And then it's audio/Chinese news.wave. Let's open that in read mode, and I'll call this Chinese news. Okay, the next step here is I'll just copy my earlier API call. And then change the file name to be this variable called Chinese news. And I'll call this Chinese response. So I'm just starting with a translation, not a transcription. Let's see what we get. Chinese response. Wow. Yesterday, the Central Meteorological Observatory continued to release a cold blue forecast, the new low since the winter of this year. The cold weather in this round lasts a long time and has a wide range of effects. However, the cold weather still can't stop people's enthusiasm. The winter scenery attracts many tourists. This article says that the cold weather has brought a lot of people to the city. Looks good to me. Again, I have no idea if that's accurate, but it seems like it probably is, or at least close. And it's pretty amazing. I don't have to tell it that it's Chinese, right? It just decided, it figured it out, and then it gives me English. And I assume one day, soon enough, you'll be able to control what translation, destination language it will give you. So I could do Chinese to French instead of Chinese to English only. Okay, that's kind of fun. Welcome back. The next thing I'll show you is that Whisper can transcribe tons of different languages. So it's been trained on, I don't know how many, I think it was 90 something languages. However, there's a subset, a pretty large subset that you can see here on the GitHub repo for Whisper that are considered accurate enough where their word error rate is under 50%. So the least accurate is Nepali. The most accurate is Spanish, Italian, English. So you can see Spanish has a 3% word error rate, which is pretty good. My understanding, by the way, is that Spanish and Italian, the phonetics and the vowel sounds make it easier to transcribe those languages compared to something like English, and certainly compared to some of these other languages, which also just have a smaller training data set. Anyway, you can use Whisper with languages that are not on this list, but the word accuracy or the word error rate is going to be higher than 50%. So I'm going to stick with things like Spanish, English, French, Italian. Okay, so we've already seen English. There's nothing fancy we have to do. If we wanted to transcribe Spanish or French or Chinese or really any language on this list, you just pass it that file with somebody speaking one of those languages, and it should recognize it and transcribe it properly. So I have a new document or a new notebook. I've slightly tweaked the recording function. I've added a file name argument just so that I can record with different file names and not overwrite the same file. And I'm also storing them in an audio directory now. So I'm going to call record audio and attempt to speak like a sentence or two of French. Let's do 5 seconds. And I'm going to call this French.wave. Okay, so here we go. Wish me luck. What am I going to say? I don't know French. Bonjour, je m'appelle Colt Steele et je voudrais un croissant. Okay. My name is Colt Steele and I would like a croissant, I think is what I said. So now I'm just going to pass that on through. I'm going to open that file up. So let's call this French file equals open. And then the path is /audio/French.wave because now, again, I'm saving them in an audio directory, which looks like this. I have a couple of things I've already put in here. There's our French file I just recorded a few seconds ago. And of course, you could send in or use any file. Presumably, you'll have something longer or more important that you want to transcribe. But let's just see if it works. I'm going to open that, read, and then I'm going to pass that through here. French file, and I'll call this French response just in case I have multiple responses. Okay, so let's take a look. French response. Bonjour, je m'appelle Colt Steele. Misspelled my name, that's okay. Et je voudrais un croissant. Okay, un croissant, I guess. Again, I don't really speak French. So just like in the previous video, if I add a prompt, I could provide the name Colt Steele, and it should be able to actually use the correct name. But this is fine for now. I'll show you another example. I have a Italian newscast that I recorded. So I'm just going to open that file, Italian news, and I called it Italian news.wave. Okay, and I'll go ahead and pass this through. Italian response, and I'll pass through my Italian news file. It's only like 20 something seconds of news. And if I take a look at the response, no. Here we are. So I don't speak Italian. You can tell, virus in China, 3 million something, influenza, 500,000 cases. So something around the coronavirus, I believe, although I just recorded the audio without even knowing what it was. In the next video, we'll see how to translate using Whisper. But that's really all there is to getting transcriptions. You don't even specify what language your audio file is. Although I believe if it is ever having trouble figuring out the language, then it's probably not going to give you a good transcription. But you could try guiding it by using the prompt attribute and steer it and say, hey, here's a conversation in, Cantonese or something, if it was struggling to figure that out. Okay? So next I'll talk about translation. Welcome back. The final thing we'll see with Whisper is how to run the model locally on our machine and get transcriptions and translations without having to involve an API at all. There's no requests going on, meaning no charges. However, somewhat surprisingly, it's a little bit slower. The OpenAI Whisper API that we've been working with has some enhancements that make it more efficient and faster, but you do have to pay 0.6 cents per minute of audio. So I'm just going to show you how to run it locally, and you can decide if it's worth doing or not. So the package that we want is on GitHub. It's called Whisper. It's also just a registered Python package. You can install it with pip. But this is the documentation, so it talks about how it works, and then it talks about how to set it up. And the first thing you need to do is run pip install, and it's not just Whisper, it's OpenAI-Whisper. This is one of the packages that has a different name when you download it versus when you import it. It kind of drives me crazy, but it's fine. It's simple enough. We only install it, usually once. So let's run it now. I've already installed it, but I'll just do it here. So pip install OpenAI-Whisper. And as you can see, it's all the requirements have been satisfied. So I already have it. The next step is to import it. And we import it under the name Whisper, not OpenAI Whisper, but Whisper. And then the next most important step is to actually download the model we want to use. And there are different sizes of models that have speed and accuracy trade-offs. The larger the model, the slower, but the more accurate. And the one I've been using is Base. It's the one they recommend. It works very well. But I've already downloaded it, so I'm going to show you something else. Maybe I'll download the small one. But the way that we use the model is we call whisper.loadModel. And that will return to us a model that we can then call methods on. So this variable model will then call transcribe on or translate. So I'm now going to head over here. And like I said, I've already run this once. The first time you run it, it can take quite a long time, sometimes a couple of minutes. So I'll show you if I do a different model I have not yet downloaded, like the small model. This will take a little while. You can see it downloading here. It's 461 megabytes that it has to download. I might even just quit this so you don't have to wait because I've already downloaded the base one. But if you haven't, presumably you haven't, if you download base, it won't take as long, but it still takes a bit of time. But then once that's done, let me just stop that cell. Once that's done, you'll have it on your machine, and you can see it's not downloading it again from scratch. And once you've done it one time, it's already on our machine, so it's almost instant. Okay, so I now have my model. The next thing I need to do is take a look at the methods that we have access to. And the first one is model.transcribe. And what's nice about doing it locally is that I don't have to open the file up myself. I don't have to call the open method and read the file and pass that to the API. Instead, I can simply provide the path to a file. So why don't we transcribe? I know I have a couple of audio files. I can't remember what I named them. Why don't we transcribe the testing file I recorded way early on? It's just me saying like testing 1, 2, 3. Is this working? So we'll do model.transcribe. And then I need the correct path. So for me, it's /audio/testing.wave. And let's save that to a variable called result. And when this finishes, There it is. Let's take a look at res. And here we are. There's a text property. It says, hello, I'm just testing to see if this works. And it saves my file as testing.wave in our directory called audio. I hope. And then you can see there's a bunch of other stuff. Segments. We're not going to worry about that. Really any of this stuff here, but there's a lot of information about the different segments that it transcribed. You can see the tokens, the actual text like I hope, temperature, the language is English, but again, we're not really going to worry about that. I just wanted to show you that it does work. So this is free. There's no request involved. OpenAI put the package out, but the API itself is not being touched. I'm not making any requests. It's all happening on my computer. So I'll also show it does work. Like if I use the Italian news.wave file, it will transcribe other languages, just like it does using the API. I don't have to specify that it's Italian. It figures it out. It transcribes Italian for me. And then down at the bottom, it's going to say somewhere, language is Italian, IT. There's more that you can do with the Whisper model itself, including a command line interface where you can provide files and have it transcribe the text for you. But also you can have it translate speech into English if you pass translate to the command line as well. And it can do language detection. It can even do multi-language files. I won't show a demo of that, but it's possible. It's a little buggy. So there's more that you can do here than you can do using the API endpoints. I assume that will change eventually. And that's pretty much it. So very easy to get up and running with it locally. Once you install it, once you go and get the model, which can take some time, a minute or two usually, and then you never have to worry about it again. Then you can transcribe as simple as calling .transcribe, and it's all happening on our machine.